Well, good morning. Welcome to New Life. Thank you so much for choosing to spend part of your Sunday morning with us. We know we say this a lot, but we really do mean it, and some of you have never heard it before. There are other places you could be, other things you could be doing this morning. You chose to be here with us. We just don't ever take that for granted. So thanks so much for trusting us with an hour or so of your Sunday morning here at New Life. We are in the middle, for those of you who don't know, a lot of you do know, some of you don't. We are in the middle of a very long series of messages called the Jesus Project. And we started back actually like Christmas time in last year, 2022. And we essentially started on this really either crazy or ambitious project to go through all of the Gospels, look at everything that Jesus said, look at everything that Jesus did over the course of a 3-year period, and try to give ourselves an opportunity to actually see not just our preconceived ideas of who Jesus is and some of the images that maybe we've created of Jesus over time for ourselves, but really to just let Jesus speak for himself. Let him say the things that he needs to say so that we can hear the things that we need to hear. Let him do the things that he did, and let us try to understand and interpret as best as we can the things that Jesus said and did so that we could, at the end of the day, become slightly better followers of Jesus. And if we get there in a 3-year period, I would be thrilled. Because if we just get slightly better over a 3-year period, I would be so happy to see that happen for all of us, regardless of where we're coming from, regardless of what your religious background is, how much church experience you have. What I think is that we can all benefit from this opportunity. Take some time intentionally to look at who Jesus is, what he said, and what he did. Most of you, if you think about your day in a lot of ways revolves around a series of transactions that happen for you. There are certain transactions that you undertake, sort of willingly. You go to the grocery store and you put all of the items in your cart, fill up your cart, you go to the checkout counter. I hope you do this. If you don't do this, we're going to have another conversation, or somebody else is going to have a conversation with you eventually. You go to the checkout person, throw all your stuff on there, they scan everything through, and at the end of it, you do something, right? Like you take out a card, or you take out cash, and you insert your card, or you hand over your cash to the person at the register, and then after you have, sort of performed the transaction, you walk out the door with the things that you just paid for. If you go to a restaurant, they trust that once you have ordered the food and you sort of eat all the food, that they're going to bring the bill. You're not going to dine and dash. If you do that, we need to have another conversation too. You're like, when they bring the bill to you, you're going to give them your card, or you're going to give them the cash, and you're going to pay for the meal that you just consumed. Most of our lives sort of revolves around transactions. In other words, if you wake up tomorrow, you will brush your teeth and get showered, I hope, before you go to work. You do all those things, kind of get yourself ready for it. You'll go out the door. You'll go to a workplace. Some of you are, we're now in like this post-COVID world where you just like walk downstairs to the office and, you kind of make that transition. Or you get in a car and you drive somewhere and you go and you sit at a desk, or you do whatever it is that you do when you go to work. And the transaction that you're making, you may not necessarily think about it in quite these terms, but the transaction that you're making is you go to work, you give your 8 hours, or your 10 hours, your 12 hours, or whatever it is, and you expect, and this is a weird thing, but you expect that somewhere, like at the end of the week, the boss is going to hand you a paycheck, and you are going to fulfill your end of the transaction by putting in the 40 hours or 50 or 60 or whatever it is that you put in at your workplace, and your boss is going to fulfill the other end of the transaction, which is to pay you for the work that you just did. If either of those things don't happen, there's going to be a conflict at some point or another, right? If you consistently don't show up and put in your time when you are supposed to put in your time at your workplace, at some point or another, the boss is going to stop paying you. Like, they're going to decide it's not worth it for me to have an employee who is supposed to show up for work and doesn't show up for work. And so at a certain point, I just decide we can't, have this little back and forth transactional relationship because it's not working for me. If you go to work, now more of us can identify with this, right? If you go to work and you go put your 40 hours in, and at the end of the week, the boss says, "Oh, I'm going to get you next week." And then next week comes around, the boss said, you know what, listen, it's really, really tight. I'm going to get you at the end of the month. How long are you going to show up at a job that you don't get paid for? How long are you going to show up and, continue to put in work and continue to put in that side of the transaction before you realize, actually, I need to find a place that actually pays me for the work that I do? Most of our life revolves around this series of transactions. And if you think about the way that we even think about then our relationships and the way that we start to think about the world around us, because so much of our life revolves around these transactions that we make every single day, that language and that thinking starts to creep into every single area of our lives. In fact, most of you, if you were to say, I am going to, enjoy some time with a friend, with my wife, with my husband, with my kids, we use words like, I am going to what? Spend some time, right? We use money language to talk about a relationship. We talk about the investment that we make in our kids. I mean, my kids are older. I've made a lot of investments in them. And at some point or another, whether we think about this or not, there's this part of us as we've been kind of conditioned by the way that we think transactionally to wonder, what is the return on my investment? What am I getting out of all of the stuff that I put in to this relationship? What do I get out of my relationship with my spouse? What do I get out of my relationship with my kids? What do I get out of my relationship with my friends? What do I get out of my workplace? We have this sort of unconscious idea that if we put in good things, we put in time and effort, investment, spend the time, then on the other end, we are going to receive, we're going to get something coming back in our direction. Is that the way that most of us kind of look at the world? If I put in good things, then what I should expect, right, and this is, sort of the subtext of all of your relationships, right? If I do good things for you, then you will do good things for me. And then we'll continue. I'll keep doing good things for you, and you'll keep doing good things for me, and I'll be happy, and you'll be happy. I'll show up for work, and you pay me. And I'll be happy, and you be happy. And we'll just keep going through the cycle. I'll go to the restaurant, I'll eat the food, I'll be happy, I'll pay the tab at the end, and you'll be happy if you're the restaurant owner, right? Like, this is the way that our world works. We tend to function in transactions, and sometimes we think of our relationship with God in very much the same terms, right? If I put in good things, then God is going to, because He's God, He's going to do good things for me on the other end. If I do enough of the right things, if I, go to church often enough, I put some money in the offering box, I maybe volunteer, I serve, I go to a small group, I read my Bible, I pray. If I do all of those things, if I do all of those things, I'm really good. And God really, at the end of the day, sort of owes me the paycheck on Friday for all of the things that I did, since the last, this is how this works. This is just a transaction between me and God. If I don't put in good things, then I should expect that, someday God's going to be really ticked off at me. He's going to be mad at me. He's going to make me sick, or He's going to make someone in my life sick, or something really bad and tragic is going to happen in my life. And because I didn't do good things, God is going to punish me for all of the bad things that I've done. This is so much of our language, so much of our thinking about our relationship with God sort of boils down to this series of transactions. I make a transaction on one end, God returns something on my investment or on what I have spent back to me, and as long as we don't, sort of upset that balance, life works just fine until it doesn't work anymore. Until you put in good things, not that this has happened to any of you, but until you put in good things and all of a sudden you feel like you're not getting good things in return. You invest good things in your relationship with people. You invest good things in your relationship with God, and you feel like, why is it not returning on my investment the way that I thought? It was supposed to be like 8% return from now until eternity. I was just going to get rich off of this. Until we recognize that maybe God doesn't operate in this transactional way. Maybe we are set up to operate in this transactional way. Maybe we are set up to sort of, put in and believe that it's going to come back to us in exactly the same way that we put it in. But maybe God doesn't work that way. And maybe that's actually good news for you. Maybe it's actually better news for you that that's true than that it would be true that somehow there was enough good stuff that you could put in to somehow merit all of the good stuff that God could give back to you. And this is just free. We're going to talk about the God piece. But maybe in your relationships with other people, it doesn't work either. That's just free. Focus on the God stuff for now. Transactional thinking, right? This is the way that we think. Puts us in control. Puts us in the driver's seat. As long as we make the transaction correctly, it allows us to maintain this illusion that we are in control of our lives. And until something comes along, sort of pushes you out of that, and it happens to all of us at different moments, and probably happens more than once at different moments in the course of your life, we get knocked off of this trajectory that we think that we are on, and we recognize that this is not the way that God works. We're going to be in Luke chapter 7. We're going to read a short story of some interaction that Jesus has. It's a healing story. It's one of these healing miracles that we will find often as we go through this series trying to follow Jesus' sayings and the things that he did. Here's how it begins in Luke chapter 7, verse 1. It says, after he had finished all of his sayings, this was in Luke's gospel. This comes right at the end of Sermon on the Mount stuff, which we did a couple of months ago, but this is kind of just reorienting us where we are in Luke's story. After he had finished all of his sayings in the hearing of the people, he entered Capernaum, and now a centurion had a servant who was sick and at the point of death, who was highly valued by him. And so we'll just kind of do a little bit of context work first before we go too much further into the story. Jesus has been preaching, teaching. We saw it last week. Everywhere that he goes, he's preaching, he's teaching, he's doing this with all kinds of authority. He's creating a little bit of a buzz in his town and in his village. The village that was basically the home base for Jesus' operation is this village called Capernaum. It's on the north shore of the Sea of Galilee. It's not a huge village, but was populated enough that a lot of people had gathered in that place. It was a little bit of a center of some commerce. There was obviously some fishing that would happen there on the lake. And it's in a sort of strategic spot there on the north side of the Sea of Galilee. Strategic enough that Rome had decided that they needed a detachment of soldiers to inhabit Capernaum. And so what you have in this little village is you've got this coexistence between Rome, who is the occupying army, Rome who's in charge, Rome an empire, sort of covering the earth, keeping people in line, Roman roads, Roman, toilets, all that sort of stuff. All kinds of good things that came with Rome, and then some bad things that came with Rome, which is that Rome really dictated what you did or did not do. And if Rome said you could, then, it was good. If Rome said you couldn't, then you didn't. And if you did, bad things would happen to you. You invest bad things with Rome, bad things will come back to you. They worked that way. And so in this little village where Jesus centers his operation while he's in Galilee, there is a centurion, a person who's over this detachment of Roman soldiers, who has a servant who is sick to the point of death, who is highly valued by him. And we're sort of conditioned by United States images of slavery and the way that worked and the brutality of that. But in this context, it's not unlikely that a Roman centurion would have a highly valued servant who was important enough to him that he treated him almost like part of his family. And so when he discovers that this servant, this person who is in his household, is sick to the point of death, he does the most natural thing that he can do. If you are in a village where you have, sort of heard the rumors and you've heard the reports of this healing itinerant preacher who's going around and making people well, he does the most natural thing that you could possibly imagine. When the centurion heard about Jesus, he sent to him elders of the Jews. asking Jesus to come and heal his servant. And when they came to Jesus, so these Jewish leaders come to Jesus, they pleaded with him earnestly, saying, "He is worthy to have you do this for him, for he loves our nation, and he is the one who built us our synagogue." So the centurion understands his servant is sick. He understands that there's this person, Jesus, that he's heard enough about, the stories of the healings and those sorts of things, to say, if I can get to Jesus, Jesus would come and make my servant well. The problem is, right, for him, he understands the arrangement. He understands the social setting. He understands sort of the context of the world that he is living in. He is a commander of an occupying force. He's not necessarily well liked. He's not necessarily the guy that when he shows up at your door, you open the door and say, "Come on in, let's have dinner together." If he shows up at your door, you probably are in trouble for something. And so he understands the situation. But he's wise enough, and he's shown himself wise enough and shrewd enough in his relationship with the people that he is, sort of in charge of, to have made some friends along the way. Because if you are the centurion over the detachment of Roman soldiers in an area that you are always going to have to be responsible for, that you're going to have to make sure you keep the peace and order and security and all of those things, it is a good thing, if you are the Roman centurion, to have some friends among the people that you are trying to occupy and keep subdued. And so he's been wise enough to sort of make some friends with the Jewish leaders. And so he goes to the Jewish leaders and says, "Listen, if you would do this for me, I would be eternally grateful for you." This is just my translation of what I think he would say. If you would do this for me, if you would go and approach Jesus, because I know I don't know Jesus well enough, and we're not, sort of in the same culture, we're not in the same world, and we don't necessarily work along the same lines, but I know how you guys work as the Jewish leaders. I know what you guys operate on. You operate on transactions. You operate on, I do this for you, you do this for me. We wash each other's hands, everybody's happy, I pay you, you pay me. We, sort of go through the series of transactions, and at the end of the day, everybody's happy. Everybody's peaceful. My life as the Roman centurion is easy because I'm not putting down revolts and riots and uprisings and all that sort of stuff. Nobody comes asking me why my area of Rome is unruly. And everybody's good. And so the Jewish leaders go to Jesus, and here's what they say. This guy is worthy of you healing his servant. This guy has put in enough good things that he's worthy of you coming over across town to his home and touching his servant, healing his servant. He's worthy of you doing this good thing because look at all of the good things that he has done for us. I mean, he has loved our nation. He is the one who out of his own pocket built us our synagogue where we worship every single Saturday. Like, this is a guy who has done the right things. I mean, he's a Roman, he's a soldier, he's a centurion, he's over this occupying force, but as good as a Roman guy can be, he's it. And if you would do this for him, then we would be grateful to you, Jesus, because you have provided for us a service. They essentially work this way. This Roman centurion is worthy to them because he is useful. Isn't this the way that we work? He is worthy of the good things that could happen to him because he is useful to us. Not because he's a great guy. Not because we love him and care about him and we're so concerned about his child, his servant. But because he's practically useful for our lives. And if we do some good things for this guy, he will be in our debt. Because that's the way the world works, right? I do good things for you. If I do enough good things for you, you owe me at some point or another. And at some point or another, I'm going to call in the favor. We use this language all the time. You help me move, I'm eternally indebted to you. You load up the U-Haul and you try all that stuff. Like I owe you forever. And this is the way Jewish leaders approach Jesus. He's worthy because he's useful. And at the end of the day, if you are a Jewish leader in a town where a Roman centurion oversees a detachment of Roman soldiers in your village, it's a really good thing to have that guy owe you a favor. And so they look at Jesus. Let's just make a transaction here. The transaction is you heal this guy's servant. He's now in not just your debt, Jesus, but he's in our debt because we're the ones who made the introduction. We sort of made the arrangement. And Jesus went with them. And when he was not far from the house, the centurion sent friends, not Jewish leaders, sent friends. The implication is these are probably people like him, not Jewish people, Roman people like him, saying to him, Lord, do not trouble yourself, for I am not worthy to have you come under my roof. Therefore, I did not presume to come to you, but say the word and let my servant be healed. While the Jewish leaders have gone to make their deal with Jesus, transaction, you do the good thing, he'll do the good thing for us. The centurion sends another detachment, another group of friends to him and says, look, I want you to understand that this is not the way that I'm seeing this. And I don't know if it was a second thought. Luke doesn't really tell us what was going on inside of the guy's heart and mind. But I think at least he understands this. I don't want to approach you, Jesus, based on us making a transaction. I don't want to approach this based on the fact that because of all of the good things that I've done, I'm worthy to have you show up in my house, heal my servant, and make everything, at least in this part of my life, better. I don't want to approach you based on this transactional relationship. I understand I am not worthy. I'm not even worthy for you to walk in the door of my house and have any sort of interaction with me. So the reason I didn't come to you directly, the reason that I sent these guys was because I recognize that I'm not good enough. I haven't done enough good stuff for you to do the good thing for me that I'm asking you to do. But what I do have is this. I have this trust. I have this conviction. I have this faith that if you would just say the word, even from the distance that you are at now, I trust that my servant could be made well. I trust that you don't have to walk into the door of my house. In fact, what he recognizes, right, is that he's got all sorts of power, he's got all sorts of authority, he's got all sorts of position, he's a big shot. But that Jesus has something that he doesn't have. And that the only access that this Roman centurion has to the things that Jesus has that he does not is not based on his worth. It's not based on the good things that he's done. It's just based on his trust. He says, I'm not worthy. But what I do have is this faith. What I do have is this confidence. What I do have is this understanding that because of who it seems that you are, if you just say the word, everything in this situation could be made well. And here's the way that he approaches Jesus from this point. He says, "For I am a man set under authority, with soldiers under me. And I say to one, go, and he goes. And to another, come, and he comes. And to my servant, do, and he does it." And what we would expect for the Roman centurion approaching Jesus saying, "Here's what I understand," we would expect him to say, "I am a man in authority." Wouldn't you? Isn't that how you would say it? I mean, that's how we would. If you were the boss, you would say, "I'm a man in authority, because I've got authority with a soldier under me. And when I say to the soldier, go do this," he goes and does it, because if he doesn't, bad things are going to happen to him, right? Like, this is the transaction that we make. Like, this is what we understand. And I say to another person, "Hey, come over here," and he comes over here and asks what I need when he comes over here, because that's his responsibility. You would say it, and I would say it, "I'm a man in authority." And the centurion says to Jesus, "I'm a man under authority." And here's what I think he recognizes. He understands that his authority isn't just his own. It's not that the soldiers come when he calls because he's this great guy. The soldiers come when he calls because he represents all of the authority, all of the power of a much, much bigger kingdom. It's not just about the 100 guys that he's in charge of in the city of Capernaum. When he says this is what needs to happen, the soldier hears not just, "Oh, my centurion tells me that this is what I need to do." The soldier hears, "Rome is telling me what to do." And because he represents all of the power and all of the authority of Rome, I'm going to jump when he says jump. I'm going to say how high when he says jump. I'm going to go when he says go. I'm going to come over here when he says come over here. I'm going to do what he says, because whether I like him or not, he represents an authority that is much higher than just his position. And so when the centurion comes to Jesus, he says, we're not going to have a transactional relationship here. We're not going to say, "I'm good enough, I'm worthy of you doing this thing that I've asked you to do. I'm coming here because I recognize in the things that you are doing that just like me, you are a representative of a much higher authority. And if you are the representative of a much higher authority, then what you say happens. Not because just of who you are, but because of who you represent." He recognizes that Jesus is under a higher authority. That there, in the village of Capernaum, where his servant is sick and in need of healing, if he approaches Jesus and says, "I'm going to do enough good things for you, now you do the good thing for me," he's missing the point. He comes to Jesus through these friends, says, "I'm not worthy for you to walk in the door, but I recognize that you have this higher authority, that you are here representing another kingdom, a power that I don't have access to except through you. That I don't have access to. I don't have any entrance to except through you. And if you're under this higher authority, I don't need you to even walk in the door of my house. I'm not worthy of it. I know I'm a Roman soldier. I'm the centurion. I'm the guy in charge, and you're just the traveling itinerant preacher from Galilee. But in this relationship, you're far superior to me. And if I approach you based on all the good stuff that I can do, I recognize that it's not going to amount to enough. You don't need me to build you another synagogue. You don't need me to, owe you a favor down the line somewhere." And when Jesus heard these things, he said, "Roman centurion, no thank you. What are you going to do for me? Let's figure out how we can line the pockets a little bit here. Let's figure out how we can, grease the wheels of justice for you. That would be Rhode Island. It's Capernaum. When Jesus heard these things, he marveled at him, and turning to the crowd that followed him, said, I tell you, not even in Israel have I found such faith. And when those who had been sent returned to the house, they found the servant well. We talked last week about how the crowds were astonished and marveled and amazed and alarmed at the things that Jesus said and did. It's a theme that will show up throughout the Gospels. But every once in a while, you'll see a moment like this where it says, Jesus is the one who's amazed. Jesus is the one who's astonished. Jesus is the one who recognizes something unique about the conversation that he's having. Jesus marveled at him, turned to the crowd of all of these, faithful Jewish people, and says, that's the kind of faith that I'm looking for. That's the kind of faith that I'm looking for. I'm not looking for a transactional relationship where you come to me and say, he built our synagogue, so you should do something good for him. And if you do something good for him, then down the road, he's going to do something good for us, and we'll just keep moving and interacting along this series of transactions where I do the good things and you do the good things, and everybody stays, relatively equal. Not in Israel have I found the kind of faith that recognizes that that's not how this works. It's not that you make yourself worthy of me showing up and coming into your house and doing the good things for you. It's that you trust and believe that despite your unworthiness, I will do the good things for you. And essentially, I think at the end here when we just see this interaction, Jesus marvels at the man's faith because he recognizes he's not worthy. He's not good enough. He has not accumulated enough good acts and good deeds in his life for Jesus to do the thing that he's asking him to do. And because he recognizes he's not worthy, because he recognizes he's not good enough, because he understands no amount of good things is going to merit the other side of this transaction, Jesus is moved with compassion for him. Here's what I think. Faith is greater than worth. Faith, the faith of this man, to come to Jesus and say, you're a man under authority. You say the word. You represent a higher kingdom and a much higher, much greater power than anything that I represent on this earth. And it's big and it's significant and it's important and there's a lot of good things that I can do for you. But I recognize that you are a representative of a greater authority. And I have faith, confidence, and trust that if you just say the word, good thing happens. And so because I have that, I don't need to come to you with a list of all of the things that make me worthy of you loving me and showing grace and compassion to me. In fact, what I can do is I can come to you and I can just straight out say, I know I'm not worthy, but I'm going to ask you anyway. I know I'm not worthy, but I'm asking anyway. And wouldn't it refresh our relationship with God if we learned to approach him the way that this centurion comes to Jesus? We get so used to approaching Jesus approaching our relationship with our Heavenly Father based on an accumulation of enough good things so that we, at the end of the day, think we're at least a little more worthy of it than someone else. Like, I know I'm not the most worthy, but come on, I'm better than him. Come on, I know, I didn't read my Bible 5 days this week, but I read it 4, and I know that he didn't read it at all. I know I don't go to church all the time, but I go more often. They're just the creaster. They go on Christmas and Easter, and that's it. Really, have you seen it? Come on, that's all you got? Wouldn't it refresh our relationship with God if instead of us imagining that we had to accumulate enough good things onto our account to somehow merit God doing good things in response to us? If we could just let that go. So I don't need to make myself worthy of you acting on my behalf. I can't. If we could embrace the attitude and perspective of the centurion who says, Lord, I'm not worthy for you to even come in the door of my house, but I'm going to ask you anyway. Would you say the word and heal? Would you say the word and provide? Would you say the word and show yourself gracious and compassionate? Because I need you. Not because I'm worthy of it, but just because I need you. Wouldn't it change maybe the way that you prayed? Wouldn't it change maybe the way that you lived in your relationship with God if you didn't look at yourself as always having to try to earn it, always try to prove it, always try to make something happen by you doing enough? And if you could just rest. I'm not worthy, but say the word. Say the word. And your goodness comes rushing towards me. Not because I earned it, but just because you're good. Would you pray with me this morning? Jesus, it is such a temptation for us to feel like we have to earn our way into a better relationship with you, earn our way into good things coming from you, earn our way into this transactional relationship with you where we demonstrate that we're worth it. And that what you want is not that. You just want our trust, our confidence, and our faith. So Jesus, I pray for those of us this morning who might be sitting here just struggling with that, struggling under the weight of trying to earn it, try to prove it, try to make it happen. I pray that you would give us rest from that constant striving, that you would give us rest in that willingness to just put up our hands and say we're not worthy. Say it out loud, we're not worthy. And yet find that you are gracious and you are good. So Jesus, we pray, meet with us here in the place where we recognize our need, where we recognize our unworthiness. Show yourself gracious and good to us. It's in your name that we pray. Amen.